Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got Pythian Priestess with me, who is very gracefully blessed us with her presence. She's a fellow occultist. I'm very much interested in her work. And now we're just going to give her a chance to introduce herself. So hi there, are you okay today?
Yes, I'm doing great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Pythian Priestess. I am a priestess of the goddess Set. You may know her by the name Isis. And I've been practicing occultism for 14 years, and I've been a priestess for 1 year.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. You're so much dedication. So you see, today we have sort of a spiritual resurgence. There is New Age, there is occultism, there is Wicca, neo-paganism. May I ask what sort of paths have you chosen exactly, and why you were drawn to them?
So the two paths that I work on, the first one is Western esotericism, specifically relating to ancient Egyptian magic, also known as Heka. I also practice the left-hand path, working with the demonic or infernal divine forces. Those paths were opened to me. I spent a majority of my young life researching various kinds of paths in occultism and decided that those two were the most that I resonated with.
Absolutely. So the Heka, I'm actually not familiar with that. Is that Egyptian mysteries then?
Correct. Yes. So it's very similar to Christianity in some ways, without the Christian dogma and the history behind it. Um, Esotericism, in particular, is not a religion. It is more of, as you said, focusing on the mysteries and understanding the way the universe works.
I see. So reading creation in a way to unravel what's within and what's outside. That's amazing. And left-hand path, you see that's almost a taboo subject in many schools of thought. Could you just refer to how it approaches morality, and then we can move on to the rest of the questions?
Sure. So morality is one of those really interesting things that I studied in my undergrad when I was earning my bachelor's degree in philosophy.
Mm.
And what I have learned is that morality in many ways is subjective from culture to culture. But there is an underlying understanding that you shall treat others as you would like to be treated. And that is very much the golden rule, as Jesus said, throughout both left-hand path and the right-hand path. I think that there's a large misconception that if one practices demonic or infernal magic, that you are an evil person, but that is not the case. In fact, it is how you apply the power that you were given. And in fact, I think that many entities in the infernal would want you to work with it as responsibly as you could, and not for personal or malevolent gain.
So it is all about self-preservance and being sort of wholesome or even healthy, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, right?
Yes.
I'm going to show this from your Instagram, actually, because you did touch on this in one of your reels, it's called, or
Yes.
it's sort of like a TikTok format, isn't it? It's very much your staple. You did touch on how morality doesn't really apply to higher beings and so on.
What if I told you that your understanding of good and evil only exists here on the third dimension? That the idea of good and evil only exists in our storybooks. It's a human concept and doesn't apply to gods or the creatures beyond.
Also from your Instagram, which is very rich in inspiration, you did touch on your main deities, that is Lilith and Lucifer. And I just really wanted to ask you what has drawn you to them, as much as you're comfortable with it, of course, but I'm very much interested in how did you find yourself in them in a way?
So I work with four main deities, two light and two dark. It is a balance. So for my light, I work with the goddess Set or Isis, and I work with Lord Ganesha from Hinduism. He was actually the first deity that I worked with. My path in the dark has been fairly recent. I I was approached by these spirits, and it was not something that I actually went seeking for. It was very much a surprise to me, but after having this conversation with both spirits, it became very apparent that a lot of my young life, when I was in the Roman Catholic faith, I was always like the bad child. I was always the rebellious one. And they said something very specific to me and said that we've always been with you. And I'm sure if you think about it, you'll notice it. And I was like, oh. So my work with them is really to balance my ego and to understand and help others understand the misconceptions that we have about the infernal, where the story of Lucifer and the story of Lilith have been very much focused on like evil, and that's from Christianity. And by being able to work with these deities and really feel their energy, it's helps me understand better the balance within the universe as a whole, as I believe that the earth was born from darkness, not from light.
Well, that is empirically correct even. So as much as I understand, well, I'm just going to reflect on this so I make sure that I got this right. I'm actually assuming here, but did you get too much of the lightness of Christianity? Did you find hypocrisy, or what was there that you felt like, okay, this is not balanced, I need to look at the other side just enough so it is good for me too?
So interestingly enough, I was raised in a Roman Catholic household. I went to Latin Mass, and I had two great aunts who were Benedictine nuns. So I would say that I was actually blinded by light to an extent where it was unhealthy for me. And young me spent a lot of time rebelling against that very constrictive dogma of Christianity. And the dark, it was a balancing act, but it's also a self-exploration. It's looking into yourself and facing, I don't like calling them inner demons, but that is the terminology most people use. But understanding those ugly parts of yourself in order to ascend, I think is very important.
Regarding Abrahamic religion, especially the light side, a lot of it is really running from your dark side, almost even ignoring that it exists. And it can lead to, complexes, unhealthy things. So I very much resonate with what you're saying right now. Moving on a little bit, so you did clarify what you usually work with. The light deities were very useful. I wasn't actually aware of them. So regarding this, what you've discovered, how do you interact with it? What is generally involved in your practice? And why are you drawn to petition candles from all the methods, as far as I've seen on your Instagram?
I do a lot of candle magic. For me, candles are the easiest way to see alchemy at it working, because candles involve all four elements. So by watching the alchemy take place, it really resonates with me. But I do magic in many forms. Mostly when I work with the dark, it is through channeling and through meditation. Whereas working with the light, it is through ritual or ceremonial magic, as well as candle working. I don't share a lot of that online because I'm asked not to. I would say that I share only about 2% of my actual practice with the general public because it is a sacred act, and the deities do not think that it is should be given to those who are unworthy. My word, not my words, their words.
Absolutely. No, you're only presenting what is consumable and digestible by the public, and then I do understand the personal aspect of it. So there is a femme fatale in your tetrad that will be Lilith, very much Catwoman archetype, very much strong independent woman archetype, the first wife of Adam. How did you recognize yourself in her? Why did you choose her? And how is it linked to, I would say, feminism or female empowerment?
Sure. So the first time I really recognized Lilith's power within me was when I hit puberty as a young girl. Understanding the power of sexuality was a very big moment. And for me in particular, recognizing that this power that I have is not holy, right? It's very much like it's earthly and can be used for malevolent purposes. Lilith in particular, when I was so unbalanced as a young teen, I had a lot of, I would say, outbursts, like anger outbursts that I now recognize through literature that really resonate with Lilith. When we hear or read her screeching in the night and the anger because she's been betrayed and hurt by men, I mean, that I feel that on a deep level, especially as a young person trying to navigate romance and try to understand this paradigm that I was given, which is like the Disney paradigm versus actuality. And for Lilith in particular, lots of people are drawn to her, but not a lot of people can handle her. She is not very forgiving. She expects a lot of you, and she expects you to reach her standards. And
Mm-hmm.
those are some high standards to reach. She does not tolerate self-pity. I remember one of the whenever I want comfort, I now go to my light goddess, because Lilith is like, I don't feel bad for you. Sucks to suck. It's like, okay.
She's real.
She's real, and she tells it like it is. I would say, she does have a motherly aspect to her for sure, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to work to earn that part of her. As
Mm-hmm.
for,
Just
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
go on, please, by all means.
So for feminism, the Lilith aspect that we are most familiar with really took off in the 1970s during the feminist movement in America, where
Mm-hmm.
the popularized story of her being Adam's first wife and rejecting him because he wanted her to have a specific sex position. And I think that story really resonates with women today, as we have been able to make our first steps again towards freedom. Compared to in ancient Greece or even ancient Mesopotamia, where women had more rights, Lilith flourished more. And to see that resurgence is really beautiful, and sometimes scary, because the more women are repressed, the stronger her wrath grows.
Yeah, she's very, very similar to Lucifer. She's very testing, isn't she? Almost like a praying mantis archetype. Like, you may approach, but if you're not worthy, you will burn, or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's very much worthy is very much a good word to use, actually. I had a conversation with both of them a couple days ago, whereas like most are not worthy for this path, and most are will not do the work that is required of them. I hope you are not the same. And I was like, okay, message received. I'll do better.
Yeah. You're not drawn to them in a, well, to her more specifically, you're not drawn to her in a superficial level. You did mention that many are drawn to her. It does sound like they're drawn to the superficialities. So, wow, this is cool. Let me check it out. For you, it was likely not, wow, this is cool. Let me check it out. For you, it was probably, wow, I deeply resonate with this thing. Let me discover what it holds for me.
Absolutely. And I think for me in particular, spirituality is a devotion. Spirituality, as a priestess of the light, I know the dedication that it takes to earn the respect of these entities. And most people who dabble in the occult do not have that respect or that honor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is incredibly important that when one approaches the dark, that you are not afraid. If you show any sign of fear, or if you bow to them, that's not what they want. They don't want worship. They want you to be your own God. They want you to stand up for yourself. And I think that's where a lot of modern, especially online, people are attracted to Lilith's beauty. They're attracted to her sassy attitude. But
Mm-hmm.
it goes so much deeper, that to the point of like true balance and what it means to be powerful as a woman.
Mm-hmm. You need to be extremely conscious with the dark. Whilst the light is more of like the superego or civilization, the dark is very much the state of nature. And in the state of nature, the weak should train further, let's just say so.
That's a
Yes.
very nice way of saying it.
Yes, that's very, the not just yet philosophy, that's very positive, yeah. Now, I do see, not just right now, but also in your online presence, I do see lots of black, red, gray sometimes. I'm wondering whether your answer will be surprising or not. It might not be, but I want to ask you, overall, what holidays, what seasons, what elements do you like the most? What are your favorites in occultism?
Mm. So personally, Samhain, of course, I think everyone really resonates, where the veil is the thinnest. I'm actually teaching right now the history of Samhain on my Patreon.
Mm,
And Samhain goes way beyond Wicca. It goes actually far back into the ancient Celtic and Druid religions. For me in particular, it's a special day because that veil is so thin that the energies are stronger. The color palettes that I choose them specifically to show the difference between my work with the light and my work with the dark.
mm,
Most of my light work, unfortunately, I am sworn to secrecy, which is why I don't share a lot of it. But I also really enjoy Imbolc, which is the midway point between the winter seasons and then the spring. And for me, that's like one of the awakening moment of the earth, where we start to see nature really start to reemerge. And I think that's really beautiful, and it is a revelation for most humans, because in order to be an occultist, you do have to tear yourself down. You have to build yourself back up. That is a part of the alchemy. And I
Mm.
think Imbolc is a really good representation of that. So you have Samhain, which is the black, the red, and the gray, and then Imbolc, which is the lighter pinks and blue hues.
You just can't tear yourself away from duality, really, and your answer very much mirrored that as well. Yeah, the Wheel of the Year. Occultism, how did it shape your worldview, you see? I'm sure it was, well, not really turned upside down. You did have a Christian cosmology going on already. But
Mm-hmm.
what did it teach you? And how did it change your approach to, for example, mortality? That's a big question in occultism and everywhere.
So for me, growing up, I was 14 when I first dabbled in the occult.
Hmm.
And what it did for me, it opened up my mind in a new way. I remember sitting in church. I went to church like twice a week when I was growing up. And I was meditating on this very large portrait of Cain and Abel. And it occurred to me, I was like, the first commandment is, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Oh my God, are there other gods? And it was just like this expansive moment. I was like, holy, okay, so there's like a lot more going on here than I'm aware of. And that's when I really started to dive into the occult. I studied, at that time, I was dating someone who was in training to become a Santero, a Santeria priest. So a lot of my early experiences with magic, even though I was a part of it, I felt very much like an outsider. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I went through and earned my degree in philosophy and theology where I studied everything I could. I studied the religious aspects, I studied the philosophical aspects, and still I was not satisfied. Like, philosophy is great, it's a mind bending game, but it didn't quite hit home for me. And when I moved to Los Angeles, we have a wonderful society here called the Philosophical Research Society, which is a library that was owned by the mystic Manly P. Hall. And it's open to the public. And by going there and reading those books and those manuscripts, I was able to see that Christianity and Judaism are only, honestly, the most recent aspects of religion that are still echoing right now. But you can go back all the way to the 14th century BCE and you will find Hinduism and Zoroastrianism, and understanding that everything that we understand now was before and had a different kind of meaning. So, for example, the bishops in Christianity wear this hat, and it has like, it's got a little dent in it. And I learned that that was a god originally, like a fish god. And I was like, why is this in Christianity? And it really helped me understand two things. One, everything is interconnected. Everything is unity. Our understanding on the physical plane is that we have compartmentalized and made barriers between everything because of our ego. Ego plays a huge part in that separation. And I respect that separation. I understand that cultures have been trampled upon and there has been deep colonization of minorities, but it is a very thin line to teeter on, because if we go too far into that compartmentalization and that separation, we lose the view of the whole. And the second thing that it taught me, as we talked about morality, is that there's something very unique about the human experience. Whereas in Christianity, I was taught that this was a trial for the next life, and that is when you will live in happiness. Whereas
Hmm.
studying occultism is that no, that is not the way you should be living. You should be enjoying your life on earth. And yes, it is still a trial in some ways to better yourself and to perform the alchemical process, but you don't need to burden yourself and constantly condemn yourself. That is not the way to live. By uplifting yourself, hopefully, You will be able to either ascend, reincarnate into a better self. And it also taught me that death is not an end. Death is merely a transition from one form of life to another.
Mhm. We did not deserve this lecture. It is so valuable. Thanks so much. You summed it up perfectly.
Thank you.
And I think you have passed it on very well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that.
Of course.
I love how Lilith echoed in your sort of origin story. It was very funny the way there is just one thing. Can you understand? Please, other gods, no. All right, and you're just like other gods, and you're immediately interested.
Yeah.
Very much like an apple metaphor.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lilith does resonate in you a lot. So because of your philosophy, lifestyle, way of thinking, and what you represent online as well, have you had any sort of discrimination at all in the past, or are you okay?
You know, it's very interesting. I did not share my lifestyle previously until October of 2019, where TikTok emerged in my consciousness. And I was like, oh, this seems like an interesting place to share knowledge where I do not worry about being discriminated against. I learned quickly after that there's also a very large Christian community on TikTok. The Christian community does not like me, and that's okay. Um, as someone who has studied Gnosticism and understands the Christian mysticism, that unfortunately, I think that a lot of them are so stuck again in that box. That their way is the right way. We've also seen since the second, was it the Vatican Council in 1957 or 1952, this new idea that you are a warrior for God, the Christian God. And I think that has really caused a huge rift in understanding. And of course, we've seen throughout Christian history that they're not the most understanding. But in particular, so many people come to me and they're like, may Jesus bless you. May like Satan be rid of you. And I'm just like, Jesus and I are cool, man. Like Jesus is great. Like I jive with him. Like I just don't get along with the Christian God. And that's my personal belief. I never disqualify anyone's belief system because that is not my place. It is not my place to judge. And I think a lot of people should also take that in mind. It is not their place to judge my path or your path, that everyone is learning on their own. That being said, I will correct people. There's this misunderstanding flying around on the internet that Lucifer and Lilith are married in this heteronormative, monogamous fashion. And that's nice, but it's not accurate. Lilith is married to Samael, who, yes, is an aspect of Lucifer, etc. But monogamy and heteronormativity are human concepts. They are not divine. And I don't think that by taking that idea, and that's the problem with TikTok, someone can run with this and like try to make their own mythology. Someone also tried to tell me that Lilith was not the mother of demons, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. That's not correct. So it's you have to be very careful to make sure that you're not picking and choosing the pieces that you are working with, because again, like to pick and choose, you're not getting the whole picture, and you're doing yourself a massive disservice, and you might piss off Lilith, and you don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. You're very tolerant, and this is exactly why you're allowing, followers of Abrahamic religions to be in that safe space for now, because your cosmology is very broad compared to theirs, and it can be intimidating. But I know what you mean with that sort of cold behavior that you can encounter that on TikTok or anywhere, unfortunately. I understand that the occult can be a sort of second life, very similar to being an artist even. What will be your day life in a way? What do you occupy yourself with when you're not practicing occultism? Do you have a day job you would like to tell us?
Sure. I work in Hollywood. I am a writer producer. I can't talk about the shows that I work on because I'm under an NDA. That's a non-disclosure agreement for those not familiar with that term. But honestly, most of my day is spending time reading and researching. That is something that I have loved doing since I was a young child. I remember at a very young age, I had a child's encyclopedia, and I just read through the whole thing because I wanted to know everything. I spend a lot of time, I really enjoy watching television as well. I think that media is so unique in this era that it would be a shame not to see other people's art being created. I also dabble in mixed medium art. So I use like old tarot cards and acrylics to make my own work. And I play a lot with, I have a cat. So I spend a lot of time. He's also my familiar. He's a magical boy. So spending time with him. But honestly, there is, as I have advanced into this farther and farther, I have come to the place where I see myself more in an ancient lifestyle, where in the ancients, there was no separation between the sacred and the ordinary, the mundane and the magical are all interconnected. And that is how I try to live my life now, that every moment of my waking life is a magical moment. That magic, and this is my personal philosophy, magic does not come from out here. Magic comes from within me, and I live and breathe it every day.
That's perfect. And that was so wholesome what you just described. The more hobbies, the better. And oh, I feel so sorry for, people being concerned, people who are concerned by the Illuminati, right? Because
Oh,
I have an occultist in front of me, and she says Hollywood, they will freak out, but let them figure it out for themselves. Can I ask what will be your next spell dedicated to, if it's a public thing?
so the next spell that I will actually be performing is for a new romance. So I had a client this morning whom is requesting to it's called a road opener essentially. So I will be creating a candle with a mixture of rosebuds, rosemary, basil, and mint. I will create a special sigil for her, and then this kind of magic I do with my light goddess because I could do it with Lilith, but I always give the client the opportunity to choose because you want to know what kind of energy that you're getting into. I do perform magic live on the full and new moons. You can check it out on TikTok if you're interested. And I have a couple of requests coming up for healing spells as well, which is a couple of different ways I do it. One is like an astral cleansing for the client as well as a candle.
Mm-hmm. Gorgeous. I'm very surprised that the spell wasn't actually for you. That's indeed very very admirable. This question, and this is going to be our last question. I don't even know where it's going. It's very tricky. I'm not sure what you're going to say. I'm looking forward for it. Would you prefer a world where everyone is a practicing witch?
No. Magic is a sacred art. Magic can be used for both good and evil purposes. Unfortunately, most humans will use it for malevolent or selfish reasons. And that's not saying a money spell is selfish. I mean spiritual warfare. If there's anything that I have experienced and watched unfold online is the use and misuse of hexes and curses. Young teenagers are filled with lots of emotions during this hormonal change in their body. However, just because you are angry at someone does not give you the justification of throwing a hex at them. In fact, hexes have lots of consequences if you are not trained to deal with them. In particular, you have to know who you're hexing. Do you know if that person is magically protected? Do you know if they have a god working with them? If you upset that deity, you're in for one really bad ride. Um, that being said, I wish that it was available to everyone so they can make those changes within themselves and lift themselves up into a higher state of consciousness. But unfortunately, as the 2020 election in America is coming up, I have seen nothing but strife and anger, and I could not even imagine a world in which that turned into a spiritual warfare. That is not a world that I want to live in.
It's a cliche that with power comes responsibility. But although I would have jumped straight ahead saying, yes, that would be fun, let everyone be awake, that would be chaos. And that's exactly what you were warning of right now.
Yeah, I struggle a lot with this question of should magic be open to everybody? And a part of me says, yes, absolutely. Age of information, let everyone have it. And then another part of me says, no, this magic is sacred and it is given to those who are worthy. Does that make me an elitist? I don't know. It is something I still struggle with, and hopefully in my later years, I will have a more defined answer.
You seem very balanced for me, don't you worry. There is going to be a bonus question because I can already hear any sort of viewer being mad about me for just slipping through that detail. For people who are, you see, worried about any sort of like Illuminati archetype, what would you tell them?
So the Illuminati was a real group, but it was a real group in Bavaria during the 1860s. In fact, the Illuminati was only around for about 2 years before it was found out by the Freemasons and then dismantled. There is this conspiracy theory floating around online about the cabal. And as someone who has been in Hollywood, I don't see any, and I have never seen any masked figures. There are no secret meetings of drinking baby's blood. However, I will say the occult is well and alive in Hollywood, but it's not malicious. And more than anything, we've seen this massive turn since 2015 with the hashtag #MeToo movement, where the predators like Harvey Weinstein have been removed from power. And with the advent of COVID, we have seen a massive transformation in the way that Hollywood is functioning completely. I don't believe there is an Illuminati in the sense of this force that is controlling the media. That being said, it is well and alive. I am openly an occultist within my community, and everyone is incredibly accepting. And if they are not, they simply don't say anything. But no, there's not. Not that I am aware of, and as someone who has seen the inside works, it's Hollywood can be very dirty, but not in that way.
More in a petty way. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, more in a materialistic, superficial, not so much spiritual, highly refined. I know what you mean.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that there's like, is that a sexy idea? Totally. Of course, it's really sexy to think that there's like this high group of people who commune in a Hollywood mansion. But no, I don't think so. I don't think that they're connected to things like Pizzagate. Um, are there people connected to Jeffrey Epstein? Probably. But again, I've done a lot of research on Jeffrey Epstein's music room, which many people, I'm sure you've seen it online. It's that building with the white stripes and the gold top on it. It's nothing special. Honestly, that whole, it's used there to scare people. It's there to entice, but there's nothing more behind it. It's a facade. It's a facade to make you look. The true occultist would never be so gaudy.
I appreciate. You see, there was this rumor of quote unquote liberals ruling the world. And one of my liberal friends told me, like, we wish, not really. So that's exactly the situation. Thank you so much for your time. This was a cornucopia of information, and I'm sure the person who seeks it, I'm sure they will be so happy to see this. So once again, thank you so much. Once again, Pythian Priestess, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.